Hello, I am Moodita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. If you are new here, welcome. I was looking for a challenge to spice up a new playthrough, and I decided to load balance all of the factories. There are 0 manifolds in this world. This is episode 31 of the load balance playthrough, and today I'm going to start the nuclear powered journey. In my opinion, nuclear isn't the big bad boogeyman some people think it is. And this may be because I just finished the assembly director systems last, and that's pretty involved. But I really feel nuclear is just a big factory, and if you break it down into smaller steps, it's really not any harder than any other big builds. This isn't my first time doing nuclear, so I do have some experience to draw upon, and I'll share those tidbits with you all throughout the videos. This is going to take more than one. In this video, I'll show the start of the build and laying out a lot of the groundwork. The foundations, if you will. The goal for this is to get the base of the factory set, train set up, and sort out the logistics of bringing everything to this factory. I'm going to utilize a good number of the alt recipes. However, one major one that I'll be skipping is the uranium fuel unit, as it requires beacons currently. Coffee Stain has announced that they will be replaced with rotors, and since I plan to start a new playthrough for 1.0, I'm going to try that new recipe then. I'm going to be using all of these nodes. And here we are at the very corner of the map. So just to show you, this is where we are, right up here in the corner, and I plan on taking this whole area and just saturating it with a whole bunch of radiation. But hopefully with load balancing it, the radiation shouldn't be too bad. I don't want it to pile up, and I will be recycling the waste. So I wanted to show you before we move on too much farther. I built out a rail line, so it's a little bit hard to tell, but right here there's a radar tower. There's a roundabout right here that kind of connects the West Coast rail line with the desert and the rest of my network. So I just branched off the line there and then brought it up here. And so that's what we've got going on right there. And I'm bringing the power down along, mainly so that I could create a floating drone port just to get all of the base material, and then I'll move it to a more logical place so it's not just floating 100 meters in the sky. So here we are right at the edge, and you probably already know what this is, but if I cross this line, that is the border of the map, and that is the border of the map right up there. So thankfully in this corner of the map, the edges are quite straight and defined, so I don't have to worry about it sloping in or anything like that. So this is basically the farthest I can build, and I figured I might as well just put all of this as far away from everything else as I possibly could. So this is the start of quite a long journey, and just to take a look, we are at 345 hours, almost 346. I only bring that up because I know this is going to take quite a long time. But let's fast forward a few hours, and I'll have a whole bunch of foundations placed, and we'll go from there. And we have some foundations. So this is a 100 by 100 grid. And sadly, I can tell you already, this isn't even close to being big enough. Granted, I don't build the most compact, and so someone might be able to figure out a way to squeeze it all in here, especially if you're willing to go vertically, where I'm trying to keep it more or less flat because I have so much space. I think it would be cool just to be able to fly over and see everything moving and grooving. So the plan right now is this big area right here is a large enough area for all of the reactors. And I'll show you later how I'm going to build those. So besides some minor hiccups that I'll talk about when we get there, I'm really happy with the way they're going to look and function. And I think the way I've designed it is going to save me a lot of headache. But that is quite a bit in the future, because the first thing I want to do is continue to lay this out. I want to block out the areas for certain recipes. So since I know that's where all the reactors are going to go, my thinking is over to this side is where I'm going to do the recycling. Up here is where I'll do all of the manufacturing to make the fuel rods. And then before that, we'll put the train station to bring everything in, because obviously being out here, I've got water. And for this project, you need a lot of water, but I need a whole lot more pieces. And so for that, I'm going to use a whole bunch of trains. So let's jump ahead again and I'll show you what I've done. Okay, and we have jumped ahead a few hours. So I've been busy and I did exactly what I wanted to do. So I was able to mark out where a lot of these are going to go. So this section right here is just going to be for the uranium fuel rods. And this is still a bit of a guess, so I'm pretty sure I'm giving myself enough room to do all of the load balancing and the merging behind them and send them off where they need to go. That's why I try to give myself a good amount of space just in case I need to use it or readjust how big they are. So this is going to be where the infused uranium cells are. And when I was looking at just how many different recipes and how many machines, I realized I just had to keep extending this platform more and more. And so I figured, you know, some of these should probably be at least a little vertical. But I did try to make them a little bit wider. These are quite a bit bigger. You know, my 8x8 floor for a lot of these. I think some of these are, let's see, 6x6. So this one's a 9x9. To try to get as much as I could without going too tall, because from a distance I still wanted to be able to see all the reactors in the back. So these are all going to be used for the quick wire. We've got our copper sheets in these towers. I've got a wonderful floating power tower here to get my drone port still powered. So I am going to move that pretty soon, but not quite yet. And then we're going to do the copper alloy ingot over there. We're going to do pure deuterium ingot. So I've carved out this path right there for all of the water extractors. And then back here, I'm going to use this space for the AI limiters, the quick wire stators, and the electromagnetic control rods. And then I started to build the train station. And for the first time, I actually ran out of a material. So because I'm using grip metal as the foundation, just because I really like the way that it looks, and it's just got a really easy pattern to be able to place stuff on. So I just really like it. And even though I'm making 60 a minute, and that's filling up a drone port, which is also being fed by 2 of the industrial storage units, I still managed to go through all of my steel, and I was noticing that my drone wasn't bringing a full 9 stacks each time, which means that I'm taking as many as I'm making. So I decided, even though the train station is not done, and I really wanted to be able to get that done first before I started working on any of my other towers, I felt it was time to switch modes, build a couple of the towers that I was going to build real close and just use the closest nodes. And especially since this ended up coming so far out, we're just going to belt this stuff over. So I'm going to use 3 of the closest limestone nodes and make all my concrete. I only need 600 a minute of the raw quartz to make all my silica, so I'm using the cave that's right in there and belting that into this tower. So we're gonna make all of our silica here. Here is another of the limestone towers. There is the 3rd tower, and then right over here, I'll just do this, that is the iron tower. And then on the other side of the train station, there is another free coal node that I wasn't using for the assembly director system monstrosity. So I'm going to belt over that coal to that tower. I'm going to make the steel ingots and steel beams, and then I'll belt that, and I'll just make a bus of the steel beams, the limestone, and the silica, and then send that over into the factory. So especially the limestone, it's really simple. I'm basically going to have the miner on the bottom floor, and then it's going to be 4 floors of 4 constructors. And thankfully, the amounts that I need for this are just super easy. Each of these towers are going to be clocked to 720. All the machines are running at 100%, which means that they're going to intake 45 and spit out 15. So I'm going to need 16, so that's why I have the 4 floors of 4. And each tower is going to output 240. And with 3 towers, I'm going to get my magical 720. So let me put all this together and we'll take a quick tour. Okay, we're back. And if this looks familiar, it's because we're right next to my old friend, Assembly Director Systems. Still going strong. And this is where we're getting the coal from. So it was pretty much the closest node. So I am just taking the 192. Don't need a ton here. The one thing I did do, because I went back and forth on how exactly I wanted to do the power for all of this, But what I realized is I really want everything associated with this to be on group 1 of the priority power switch, because even something as little as 1 coal node is integral to the entire thing. Because if I don't get enough coal, then I don't make enough steel, don't make enough steel beams. Whatever the steel beams are going to aren't enough, and eventually the system will crash. So even the smallest thing, like I'm making 80 iron plates somewhere, but without those I can't make the nitric acid. And so I need everything to be able to always be on. I don't want anything on a different grid that is a lower priority that for whatever reason might shut off, right? So that meant I needed to use a few more of the power towers and create a few more grids. But in the long run, it'll give me the peace of mind and should work pretty well. So the coal is just coming around here. We're just gonna go straight through the bottom. I think I can actually fit through here. Perfect. And this is where the train station is. We're just doing a little bit of load balancing there, but the line for the coal is just running right underneath, and then we're just gonna pop out on this side. And here we are. So right next to another of the iron nodes that I'm using for that factory, I put this one down. And I think I forgot to mention, but I put this symbol on all of the factories that are pertaining to this project. I know there's obviously no radiation in here, but it kind of helps signify that this is part of this whole project. So we've got the iron, and then we're just using the 4 smelter blueprints, creating the iron ingots. We're sending those up to our 5 foundries. And then I realized that I then needed 5 constructors. So instead of grouping them all up and then resplitting them all out, it just made a lot more sense to just have them be 1-to-1 belts. Obviously this is a bit excessive. I could bring it in a foundation or 2 and these things wouldn't be nearly as long. But I like the way it looks. So this is going to make all of our steel beams. I just needed to do a little underclocking because I only need 72 steel beams per minute. But getting this done and out of the way and turned on now will more than double the amount of steel beams I have available to keep producing all of those foundations. So those are just going to go over to here, and then we're just going to bust them over to where all the limestone is going. So we've got the first tower, and its output is just coming over to here, coming over to this tower. And the way I decided to do the splitting of everything is I found it would be easiest if I split it down here. So from here, the 720 is getting split in half, and then each of those halves are then getting split in half. So I've got my 4 equal belts right here. Each one goes to a different floor, feeding the 4 constructors, which then group up together with the other limestone. So the first 2 towers combined give us exactly 480. So we've got a Mark IV, and that goes into the 3rd tower. That'll collect the last 240. And then for this guy, we've got just some belt that's coming in through the cave. I decided to just make it simple, easy, and just not complicated. I've spent hours before laying down concrete in these kind of tunnels to get the belts to look more like the rest of the world that I have. But I'll be honest, it spent hours. None of it was quite perfect because the twists and the turns and the ramp angles and whatnot, it's not the easiest to make look really fluid and smooth. And I just didn't feel it was worth my time because I just never go back into these caves once I've turned them on. So the belt is just coming out of the miner, and I just have it run along one side of the cave. Each place that I put a conveyor pole, I just put the power pole next to it to be able to kind of keep them together and try to keep it as neat as possible. I just really didn't feel like spending the time concreting the whole tunnel that I was never going to look at again. So that just comes over to here, and then we just split it into thirds, and so each third will feed a different floor. And then we're just using the 3 constructor blueprint, so I've got 9 on each floor. This is going to turn 600 raw quartz into 1000 silica. So to deal with the output, I just decided to split the middle floor in half. So half of it goes down to the bottom one, the other half goes to this top floor, 2 equal 500 belts. And those are just grouping up with this bus, heading over here, into the tower, and then down into the final bus that is going to lead through the train station, So the plan with the train station is I built quite a bit bigger of a platform than I needed to. And my thinking is with the amount of train stations that I'm going to need, I could have all of the rail work floating, or I could just give myself more space and make everything just so much easier and have the last bit of where they're all going to split off into the individual train stations on flat surface. It'll just make everything a lot easier. The blueprinted railways are great, but flat foundations are just easy and much more flexible. So with giving myself plenty of space, I figure this is going to be a great place to do any of the load balancing I want to do before I send them off into their mini factories over here. But for now, these are just going to come through here. For the silica, they're just going to go straight into sinks right away. For both the steel beams and the concrete, what I decided to do is just have 2 more industrial storage buffers out here. So that way, in not too long, I'll just always have more or less a full container full of both concrete and steel, because I'm sure I'm still going to need a bunch more. So I just have some smart splitters set up so that once those containers fill up, then they'll go to the sink. And that way I can turn on this tiny bit of the factory for now and have some extra materials that I'm going to need. Since the red power towers on top of the rail lines are bringing the main power grid, I just ran a temporary line over here. So this right here is definitely going to get switched up because I'm not going to need these sinks in the long run. So I've just got a temporary priority power switch set up. So we can flip this and get this little part of the factory turned on and get some much needed steel beams and concrete. And there we go. That's all the towers turned on, and I now have 72 steel beams, 720 concrete, and 1,000 silica that I don't really need quite yet. But that's alright. This is a good first step in the right direction. And as much as I would have loved to be able to just turn the entire thing on with just one switch and watch everything come to life, with a project this big, not being around very many of the nodes, with all the trains and everything, it's just really not super practical for me. So there's definitely going to be a few different stages to this whole project. But that's okay, because I think turning it on in stages is definitely a better way to do it. It definitely makes doing the troubleshooting a whole lot easier, being able to break it down in smaller pieces and not try to hunt down a small group of machines out of 1,000. Since it is going to take a little while to get all the way over there and build up enough of a supply that I'm not going to continuously exhaust, I am going to work on the next small project, and I'm going to head out to the grassy fields because there are some resources that we're going to steal from there and have trained over here. So we'll be over there in just a blink of an eye. And here we are back in the grassy fields. So this empty spot finally has a train station. So I still need to switch things around a bit because this isn't quite its final form, but it's a good start. So this is where we're going to send all of these products out to the northwest. And we're going to be bringing in a couple different things. So over here, I am going to be using that sulfur node and that limestone node. And if you're wondering why in the world do you need more limestone, you just made a bunch of concrete. You are absolutely correct. The reason I'm bringing in a very small amount, this is only 120 limestone. This is how I'm going to deal with the 240 wastewater from the recycling process. Instead of recycling it back, when I really want to be sure I have no issues with water, I just don't recycle it. I would much rather use a whole 3 refineries and 120 limestone to turn that into concrete, and then I'm just going to sink it. It's ever so slightly less efficient with power, but when you're dealing with such a big power plant, I find it negligible, and I'd much rather have the security of knowing that it's just going to work. So that's what those two nodes are doing, those are just going to be bussed in over here and then put onto the train. The other items are going to be from over here. So I just built around some existing towers. So I'm already using these two for the rotors and the concrete. And those are just part of my normal factories feeding the storage. But these ones that aren't turned on are the new ones. So this little tower, super simple. We're just using 120 of the iron ore, turning that into ingots with the 4 smelter blueprint, and then using the 4 constructor blueprint, turning those into iron plates. So 120 iron ore to 80 iron plates, and then that gets bussed over to the train station. The last one over here is just a little bit bigger. So I needed the coal. So I needed to do a little bit of build balancing because of the numbers that I'm working with. So to break this down, I need 640 steel pipes. To make that many steel pipes, I need 972 steel ingots. I'm using the solid steel ingot recipe like I always do. So I need 648 iron and coal. With these being iron nodes, it was easiest just to do 600 on one, and then I'm using that second one for just a measly 48. That way I could use pretty much all the machines at 100% and make all of the belt work really easy. I clearly missed a catwalk there. But this is a pure coal node, so I needed to split the 600 off from the 48. So to do that, I'm just using the smart splitter, and I'm just giving myself plenty of space to make sure, because since Mark V belts can hold 780, but this only has 648, there's going to be a good amount of gaps. I really didn't need this long of a distance, but after the assembly director fiasco that I ran into a similar issue, I just decided to play it safe. So this makes sure that we're full, but it's getting limited down to 480. This one is Mark II, so that's only 120. Those two combined equal 600. With the overflow then going on to this Mark I, because it's only going to hold 48. So the Mark I will go into this small tower. The 600 line is feeding the bulk of it. So just using the 5 smelter blueprint, we just have 20 smelters smelting all 600 of the iron ore, and then those are coming up to the 3 floors of 5 foundries each to make all of the steel ingots. So that's where we're going to combine all of that coal with the iron. And then to top it off, it's got 3 floors of 10 constructors each. So just using the 5 constructor blueprint, each one of these floors fed one of these floors, so all of the belt work was really simple for this, and that's kind of the reason why I split it between 648 instead of just dividing this in half, because that would have made the initial belt work really easy, but then load balancing everything else wouldn't have been as smooth. So with the small tower doing only 48, it's using a whole 20%, so thankfully the power usage is super small, and all of these are underclocked slightly to the right amounts. And then the finished 48 steel pipes are just going to be belted right along here, joining up with the rest of it, and on into the train station. I haven't finished the train station, so I'm not going to turn this on quite yet. So instead, we are going to head on to the new location, or I'm going to grab some more materials for this project. This little section of the map, which is right here, is called the Desert Canyons. So there is the heavy modular frame and accompanying factories right there in the distance. And so this area has a whole bunch of resources. We've got oil, which I don't currently need. We've got some iron and some copper, which I'm not going to use. But I built a train station, and what I want is what's back here. So we're going to grab a couple different resources. So instead of adding a roundabout, what I decided to do was just have some junctions. Since I know where these trains are coming and going from, and they're only going in those 2 directions, I didn't need a roundabout, because I don't need these trains to be able to go in every which direction. So instead, I just made this a little bit simpler, and I just branched off a line, and that's going to come up here. It's going to loop around that rock. And that's how the trains are going to get into the train stations, and then to leave, they're just going to go out, go over the main train line, and then drop back down, and then merge up. That should keep traffic moving pretty smoothly. So I've just got a temporary drone port for the couple resources that I'll need. I don't need the whole storage unit. I shouldn't be building a whole lot because for the most part, this is collecting ores. So what I want from over here is going to be Caterium, iron, and copper. Oh yes, and sulfur. I forgot. I'm going to actually have to add a whole second layer, some more train stations, because spreadsheets are great and fantastic, and I absolutely love them. But they're only as good as the person using them. I forgot to select a cell, and so even though it was in all the recipes correctly, when I was putting together the part of the spreadsheet to see what things I needed to import, I forgot to select a cell, and so long story short, this is going to get twice as tall because I forgot I need an extra 1,000 sulfur. But for now, let's just talk about these. I'm going to be using this node right here for Caterium. I'm going to be using these two nodes for the iron. And just on the other side of this little hill slash cliff, I'm going to be using that Caterium node also. And if we continue through these foggy trees, oh, they're over here. I almost lost them. So over here, I've got 3 nodes. 2 of them are going to be taking 600 copper. The last one's going to be taking 650. Normally, shipping ore is not really ideal because it only stacks to 100. And at least in my case, I'm usually shipping decent sized quantities. But since I'm using the copper alloy ingot recipe, I'll be combining the copper and the iron to make copper ingots, and I'm going to get more than I put in. So unless I want to do a lot of the manufacturing out here, it is still better because the ingots and ore both stack to 100. And then I'll also be using some sulfur nodes, which are, I think, right around here. But let's snap our fingers and fast forward a little bit. And for the next part of the logistics puzzle, we're out here in the Red Forest. I need 120 aluminum casings for the heat exchangers. I'm just going to branch off 180 aluminum ingots from this line right here, send them into 2 constructors, and that's going to make my aluminum casings I need for this project. Since I'm only transporting 120 aluminum casings, and they stack to 200, I only need 1 freight car. So that means this one will be able to share one of the train stations, but I'll go over that when I get to it. And from here, let's take a quick journey down the train line, and I'm going to show you the new train station that I just added. And here we are. So this is the new train station that is solely for the uranium. So the way it's going to branch off, and it's going to come around here, it's going to make a nice little loop right on the outside of this giant rock and go into the train station. Underneath is where we're doing the load balancing and bringing in the uranium. So this is right on top of the cave that has one of the uranium nodes, so we're just bringing up 500 from out there. And then the other 500 is coming from the swamp. So it's quite a long bus, and I believe the one coming from the Red Forest right here would have been closer. So my reasoning behind doing it this way is I never build inside this Titan Forest because they have made it a lot easier, but with the scale that I'm building my factories now, it's just really not easy to build inside here. So I'd rather just take the resources out or have a line of bright green uranium just run through the whole thing. But since I'm not going to be in this area, it's not going to affect me as much as having the uranium run right through or right next to, which will get used more often than the forest will. So that's the reasoning I went with a long bus to bring them both together, because I just wanted to do it with one train and not have it make 2 stops, because I could have easily just added another train station over there, had the train loop out there and grab it. The only thing is that would have added quite a bit of time to the round trip, and then I wouldn't have been able to do it with as few of the freight cars as I am using now. So underneath, we're just doing a little bit of load balancing. So this is really pretty simple. I wanted to take 2 lines and spread them across 5 freight cars. So 1,000 per minute uranium will only be 200 per freight car. Since freight cars have 32 slots, each slot will hold 100 ore. So if they're going to receive 200 each, I've got 16 minutes to do a round trip, including the loading and unloading. But that should be plenty of time and plenty of wiggle room. But this should be so much time that I'm able to actually have this wait here for a few minutes to have it be a fuller train, and it'll also be on the tracks a little bit less often. So the way I did this is to take 2 and go to 5. I basically needed to split this up, and each of these is going to get 2/5. Since they're equal amounts, I didn't need to actually do a complete load balancer. I just needed to split them 5 ways and then combine them in groups of 2. So first we go into the merger, and then we split it in half. One of these has 3/5, because we're going to use all 3 of the outputs. The other one has the 2/5, and then the one part that we need to cycle back. So I grouped those 2 together, send them off into one freight car. Then I grouped 2 of these together, and then that last one is going to get grouped with the last one on the other side, and we just have a mirrored setup on this one. Really simple, and I think it looks pretty cool. So here we are at my big rubber factory. So originally I figured I was just going to put it on a train and it would go over because, I mean, they're not that far. But once I actually built that out, I realized, oh wow, this is actually really close. No point in adding another train and more traffic when I could easily just do this. So what I'm going to do is I only need 120 rubber. That's exactly 2 refineries. So I'm just going to disconnect that, plug this up, and a 120 line is just going to head on over and then across the water over to the factory. So I'll set up another sink over there so that I have this all running, because it will take quite a while with it only being a Mark II belt to get that whole distance. And that way we'll have that ready to plug into the factory once I start building the machines. And here is the train station. So now that I finally had plenty of concrete and steel beams, I was able to finish this. So this is the junction I came up with. Really simple. The goal was I wanted at least 1 train length as a buffer between the last signal and the train station. So the very first one is my train station, so it really didn't matter that there wasn't a huge gap because it's only going to be my train on this one. And so for the rest of them, that's what mattered, and so those are the farther ones out. I think one of these only has 1 train, but the rest of them may have 2 trains stopping at each of these train stations. So it needs to be able to wait here and then not block any of the other lanes and create this huge backup. And that way this will keep traffic flowing pretty easily. So the next step will be to come down here and fill it up with all of the load balancing. So I think that's where I'm going to end this video, because I would really like to make that more of a focus point of another video, because there's going to be quite a bit of load balancing, and that's been a lot of what this playthrough has been about. So I'd like to be able to take some time and go through and actually build some of the load balancing to show off that it's really not too bad. So look forward to a lot of load balancing in the next video, and thanks for watching.